Good evening and welcome to the Strategic Planning Committee meeting tonight. And Town of Comox respectfully acknowledges that we're standing on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and call the meeting to order. And first item is adoption of the agenda. All in favor? Great, thank you. And tonight we have two delegations. First is going to be Nadine from Watt Consulting Group, and you're going to talk to us about Roundabout. So Nadine,
Just joining right now.
okay,
So you did not hear what we said.
okay. Hello, Nadine, can you hear me? I think you're on mute.
I will unmute myself. Hello.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Welcome, and understand you're going to be giving us a presentation on some roundabouts. So I'll let you make the presentation, and I'm sure there'll be questions from council after you're done. So you have the floor.
Okay, great. Hopefully I get the right screen here to share. Hang on. Okay, share screen 2. And okay, are you? Okay, is that the presentation?
Yeah, we have it there.
Okay, I'm slowly figuring out the right screen to pick. Well, thank you for having me. Sorry I was a minute late there. Just final touches on the presentation. My name is Nadine King. I'm with Watt Consulting. I'm a senior transportation engineer. Fairly familiar with the town of Comox. Worked extensively on your 2011 Master Transportation Plan, and as well as the Rodello Street design project that started in 2014 and then was put on hold. So I will just dive in. So I'm pretty sure everyone's fairly familiar with the location, but it is the two intersections of Rodello and Comox Avenue. It is currently an offset intersection with a pedestrian crosswalk in between the two offset intersections. And the pedestrian crosswalk has a pedestrian signal that stops people on each edge of Rodello to allow people to cross. Back in 2011, this was a pretty busy crosswalk with the hospital in full operation, and was used fairly heavily. So here's another view of it. So yeah, vehicles stop before the intersections, and then the crosswalk is in the middle. So back in 2011, and then reconfirmed into the current update transportation master plan. Sorry, let me just turn that off. It was very hard to get on and off of Rodello Drive onto Comox Avenue off both side streets. And this has only gotten worse since 2011. So definitely during peak hours, you really struggle to make a turn out of that intersection. There's an average of 2.5 collisions per year over the last 10 years at the intersection. Most of those collisions are rear ends, which seem to be due to the pedestrian signal going red, the car in front stopping, and the car behind not paying attention and rear-ending the car. There is quite a distance to the crosswalk, so I don't believe we saw any serious pedestrian incidents from rear-enders being pushed into the crosswalk, but also a potential as you have rear-enders and collisions. There's also some observed confusion at the intersection at times. Car stops here for the signal, and then the side street car is like, great, I've got a gap, and doesn't really pay attention to the fact that there is a pedestrian crossing and there is an opportunity that they, sort of have to stop suddenly or make a bit of an awkward move. As well, the pedestrian signal heads are quite far away from the stop bars, which sometimes can lead people to slamming on the brakes fairly suddenly. So back in 2011, and then reiterated in the new updated master plan, We looked at multiple options for this intersection, things like restricting movements and full signalization. And basically the roundabout was the best option that was identified for the location. It provided all movements for all user groups, bikes, peds, vehicles, could accommodate heavy traffic and buses, and would provide good traffic operations for all legs going into the long term. So in 2014, Watt & Coors was hired by the town to prepare the preliminary and detailed design drawings for the project. We looked at 4 different options for the intersection in terms of where the roundabout should be located. Should we have it closer to the east side, closer to the west side, further north, further south into the hospital property? And we ended up with sort of a balanced, we tried to balance an approach where we minimize property impacts as much as possible and created the least amount of additional work. And we got that design to about a 95% level. So it's very close to being finished. And then it was decided to put it on hold. So this is the preferred option. As you can see, very minor little corners here on the north side. This is the single family house. This is a commercial building. Here's the hospital property. We didn't affect this corner at all, but the biggest impact was at the time to the hospital property, mostly because it was also the least used and also took up the least amount percentage-wise of their property. Otherwise, we were going to either go through this building or this property here was going to be significantly impacted. We ended up with a 35-meter inscribed diameter, so that's the distance from outside edge to outside edge. This design allowed us, as I said, to get all large, heavy trucks through the intersection, accommodate buses without having them to go onto this mountable apron. We ended up with an apron of about 5.8 meters, travel lanes about 5.5. So a standard travel lane is about 3.5. These are wider because they are traveling in a circular motion. And then we have a nice center island that's about 12.5 meters in diameter. So a fairly large area to allow for some potential landscaping, gateway feature, sort of sky's the limit of what the town would like, from very minimal. We've seen them as simple as some rocks with some growing rose bushes to some very complicated things with fountains and statues in the middle, giant anchors, all kinds of things. So a variety of options would be available for the town to put there. As well, we created some additional, by shifting this, we've got some increased green space over here, buffering the residential properties, and minor amount of potential landscaping space here as well. So that's the general design that was come up with in 2014, 2015. The goals for that project and for really this roundabout project is we wanted to make it safe for everybody. It helps to reduce speeds on the corridor to 30 kilometers an hour. It also eliminates a lot of the conflict points between all those different user groups. So cars turning into pedestrians, bikes and vehicles conflicting with each other. So that was our first goal. Second goal was to help reduce the impact on the environment. Roundabouts reduce vehicle congestion. Those cars on the side roads aren't idling as long anymore. It also doesn't stop traffic on the major road like a traffic signal would. And if they do stop, it's for a much shorter period of time, so there's less pollution. And just general improved safety also is a general improvement to the environment, right? We don't have broken glass flying everywhere and serious incidents occurring. It's also an improvement for the community. So the first one is financial long-term. Signals require maintenance, ongoing power costs. And so in the future, there can be less maintenance. The caveat on that would be if you do put in a very complex flower planting scheme, those can be pricey to maintain. But if you pick a balanced approach, you can minimize your longer term maintenance costs for those things. And also the less power and the less, there's also less lighting pollution while a roundabout is lit. It's not, it doesn't have the constant 4 signal heads plus overhead lights. And you don't have as many vehicles stopping and starting and causing lights to shine into buildings, particularly at night. And as I mentioned, there's just an overall benefit to the community for improved landscaping and beautification of the area. So just want to touch on some of the different ways the modes are accommodated and the benefits. So for pedestrians, well, today there is a controlled crossing for people to get across so they know the cars are going to stop. There is still the opportunity for those side street vehicles to potentially to come out at them and people not being prepared for it. Right now, if you wanted to continue down some of the roads, you may have to make multiple crossings. With the roundabout, you could just cross one leg and continue sort of north, south, east, west in a much easier fashion. As I mentioned, there's less conflict points. You have to wait less time to cross because all you have to do is wait for that first car to stop and you can cross. You don't have to wait for the signal to give you that opportunity to cross Comox Avenue. You only have to focus on one lane of traffic at a time and in one direction. So, if you're this pedestrian here, you just have to make sure this section is clear of traffic before you go from the curb to the refuge island. And then we do provide a refuge island on all 4 legs. So you only have to cross one leg at a time. Most people continue on, but if the car in the opposing direction doesn't stop, you have a safe place to wait. As well, you're exposed to traffic a lot less. It's a lot shorter crossing distance. You just cross one lane, refuge, one lane, versus being exposed on that much longer crossing. For cyclists, we decreased the number of conflict points. There's elimination of head-on collisions between cyclists and vehicles. It generally increased safety and comfortability because vehicle speeds are less through the intersection. They have to start and stop less. And we have designed the roundabout for 2 options for cyclists. The first one being a multi-use path around the outside. So we basically have widened the sidewalks and made them 3 meters wide. So cyclists can come off the bike lanes on Comox Avenue, exit onto the side, and then cycle around and then use the crosswalk to cross and then continue on. And then when they get to the far side, they would use a ramp like this to get back into the bike lane and continue along. That's generally for your less confident or more concerned cyclists. It takes them out of the flow of traffic and gives them some protection. However, the other option is that cyclists take the lane. So these are actually a couple of youth at a roundabout near the Victoria Airport. They've just taken the lane. They actually should be a little further out, but this is where they were comfortable. And so the reason they can take the lane is vehicle speeds are low, people are entering, exiting slowly, and they have lots of time to observe those cyclists. And they tend to just allow the cyclists, even if it's a little slower than they would want to go through the roundabout by a few kilometers, they're happy to it takes an extra second and that cyclist is through the roundabout in front of them. So we have provided those 2 options in this design. For vehicles, as mentioned, there's a lot less conflict points. The current design has 18 conflict points for vehicles. The roundabout only has 8. As we mentioned, very long wait times potentially on the side road to get out. That would be significantly reduced and much more reliable that they can get out and make left turns particularly. The flow of traffic is more continuous, less stops and starts. So what we tend to see is, less long queues, but more of like a rolling queue or a rolling set of cars at roundabouts. And as I mentioned, it accommodates the large buses and vehicles that could be on this corridor. In terms of safety, basically we eliminate head-on and side T-bone intersections, which generally reduces fatal collisions by 90% at intersections and 75% of injury. And that's because the T-bone and the head-ons those tend to be your very severe accidents. Overall, the reduction in collisions would be lower at about 37%. Because they can still be collisions at roundabouts, but they tend to be slower because everyone's going much slower. So instead of someone, 50K and 25 kilometers an hour hitting each other, you've got, a 25 and a 15 kilometer an hour vehicle. And they also then tend to be more of these side swipe where they just touch on the side. So a lot less chance for a very severe injury type collision. And what that does also is reduces the cost on ICBC. And so there's a benefit in reduced collision costs for them. So the next steps that we have to take with the town would be to finalize the drawings, so get them those final 5%. We need to finalize some street lighting, and there were just some final details that needed to be confirmed for the drawings, and then they would be ready to package up and put out for a tender if the town decided to do that. Back in 2015, the cost estimate was $1.2 million for all the works, including the roundabout, street lighting, landscaping, and the project was identified and is part of the DCC program, and there is $1.2 million currently in the DCC revenue for this project. That being said, we will be preparing updated cost estimates. It is a very challenging market at the moment to get good prices, and it can be it can fluctuate quite a bit depending on the day and the month that a project gets tendered at this point, but we will be doing our best to try and provide that with updated costs. And a lot of that has to do with COVID and just lack of materials and lack of people and challenges that way. The city is also going to explore further funding opportunities. Town. I always write city town. So potentially ICBC could contribute some money, as I mentioned, because you're reducing the number of collisions there. That's a cost savings for them, and they tend to be willing to put money in where you can save them money in the long term. And then there's also various grant opportunities, whether provincial or federal, out there. And then I just wanted to touch briefly on constructability. And so how could we build this going forward? So with the St. Joseph's site redeveloping, and potentially this area being disturbed anyways, there's really two ways to build a roundabout. One is you construct a bypass, a very simple 2-lane, probably 6 meter, maybe 7 meter wide strip of asphalt that we basically detour people on roughly the orange lines. It'd probably be a little bit smoother than that. And then that frees up the area to build the majority of the roundabout as much as possible. That the downside is it requires land, potentially an opportunity here to explore that with this site coming forward. It's much cheaper to build and it's much faster. We've sort of seen these built in about 6 weeks using this method, where if you build it in stages, you could be looking at 6 months to build it. The other challenges with building it in stages is you get increased traffic issues. So you're pretty much going to take Comox Avenue down to 1 lane each direction. You would basically have to almost single lane alternate the traffic for the majority of the construction, which is going to be a big challenge with the volume on Comox Avenue. And obviously, since it's going to take longer and they have to be working around much closer to traffic, it costs more. So there's definitely ways to do it, but it's definitely very challenging. And I guess the third way really would be just, yeah, a full closure and a full detour, which is probably the least desirable way to do it, but is also an option using, back road and Anderton and various routes, Glacier View, to get through the space. So yeah. And so that's basically what I have to talk about, but happy to answer questions or thoughts. And yeah.
All right. Thanks, Nadine. Does council have any questions? Councillor Minions. Sorry, Nadine, can you put the slide that has the diagram of the roundabout up?
Yeah.
Thanks, Nadine. It's just a really quick question. Was the 1.2 in DCCs from 2015 accounting, like in the DCCs then, or is that a current 2021 amount in DCCs available?
Maybe Shelley.
Sorry, what was the question? If the 1.2 million, what we have in revenue is from 2015 or current?
Yeah, I just mentioned that there was 1.2, I guess, set aside, and I'm just curious if that number was from when the report was done in 2015 or would still be accurate for 2021 now.
Yeah, that is to date. So that's what's in the DCC fund to date. Yeah.
Thank you. And is it specifically set aside for that roundabout, or that's the total that is available in all of DCCs?
So in the current DCC transportation DCCs currently has only the 2 roundabouts listed. This roundabout, Comox Avenue, Rodell, at 1.2 million, and then the roundabout for Glacier View and Comox Avenue for another 1.2 million. So we have a total of 2.4 million to collect for DCCs. The current revenue to date is half of that at just the 1.2 million. So that's where the 2 costs came from when we set up the DCC funds.
Thanks. So my question was, which roundabout is more important, this one or the one at the top of Comox Hill at Glacier View? And secondly, is it reasonable to have 2 that close, or will everybody be dizzy by the time they get through? And thirdly, I guess the question is maybe another one for Shelley, which is, we've got a lot of projects in the works right now. Is there more DCC money coming for these? That's three questions, I guess.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, go ahead, Nadine.
Oh my goodness, now I forgot the questions. Is which one's more important?
You had to pick one. Which would you pick first?
I think there was one identified. I think it's more of which one does the city prefer, really. And I think this one has good opportunity at this point to get the land, as well as deal with a pretty challenging offset intersection. So probably this one at this point.
Okay.
And
And is it good practice to have 2 that close together?
yes, yeah, they can be actually almost touching. You can get them as close as almost touching, which we call the peanut. But yes, they can be very close to each other.
You could put them together, you could have a figure 8. It'd be really
That's
cool.
right. Yeah, there was one built once.
Yeah. There you go. Once. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely say I wouldn't want them to touch, but
Yeah. I don't want to be in the
being-
middle. Yeah. Although
yeah.
it's fun. And
The
then
nice-
my question was to Shelley was about future, or maybe Marvin, future money coming in. I know we've got a lot of projects in the works right now, and if there's more coming to top up our fund.
Yeah, so we continue to collect the transportation DCCs as development happens. So that 1.2 million will just continue growing till we get to the 2.4, and then we'll look at. I mean, we obviously like to update our DCC projects. You can only have your projects within the 5 years of what you're projecting, so it's something that you should be updating on a regular basis. But as development occurs, we continue to collect those DCC transportation costs.
Perfect. Thank you.
Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about the performance of roundabouts when you're looking at vehicles that are going to be traveling generally in one direction? You know, we're not one direction, but one linear direction. So most of the traffic here is going to be traveling east to west. Will the roundabouts slow down the ability for that east to west traffic to continue? Or will they be able to keep going at generally the same clearance rate as they are now?
So they'd be generally the same clearance rate as now, but they would be going a little bit slower through this intersection. So when the light is green, they can be going 50 kilometers an hour through the intersection. The roundabout will slow them down slightly, but there will be less stopping and starting. So right now, if a pedestrian, they could get stopped twice in a minute or twice in 2 minutes if a pedestrian crossed. Where this way, and they'd be stopped for that, say 20, 30 seconds that the light goes. Here, if they get stopped, it would only be for a few seconds for the pedestrian to cross the one leg. And so, yeah, it'll generally be the same or better, east-west.
Okay, thanks. I have a question, Nadine. Did you say that for the pedestrians, there is no signal that they just walk across when it's free? Is that correct?
That's the current design. There are some roundabouts that have, pedestrian activated flashers. So the side mounted ones. The reason that those got put in at that location was they overplanted the islands and the sides, and you actually can't see the pedestrians at all, and they sort of jump out at you. But in general, we find that they don't need anything extra to make the cars stop, that there's good sight lines, they're having to slow to enter anyways, they're exiting at a slow pace. So we generally don't need to provide any extra control that actually makes the cars stop, other than the law that requires you to stop for a pedestrian.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Bissinger.
Yeah, thanks. Is my mic on? Yeah. Yeah, I guess Nadine, thanks for presenting. I guess my question is, like, from a cyclist point of view, and I've been commuting for like 20 years on my bike downtown Ottawa and all sorts of areas. And like, when I go to the base, that roundabout at Night Road is either the best thing when there's no cars or the most terrifying part of my commute when there are vehicles. And not because I don't know how to ride a roundabout, but because most vehicle drivers have no idea what to do. Like, I've often gotten to a point where I almost got like sideswiped. And even when I got into the intersection and started biking, there were no vehicles, but by the time vehicles drive through them, they're like creeping up right behind you. And, I'm always like, yeah, I'm signaling, like I'm trying to either like hug the side of the lane or go in the middle of the lane just to like show that I own the lane and, back off. But it is still terrifying. And I'm just wondering, like, is there any signage or like paint markings you can put down in the right roundabout, sort of like delineating where the cyclist should be, and when you're going inside of the lane or whatever, or sorry, like on the outside part of the roundabout lane, just to sort of have that delineation, just because I said, like, it's either the greatest part of the commute because you just fly through it, or it's the most terrifying if you have like some driver that doesn't know, and most drivers don't know. Like, I probably also am guilty of that, so just curious.
Yeah, so there isn't any they suggest you don't mark like a bike lane in a roundabout, just because vehicles may drift in there, and especially trucks. And you could potentially do some sharrows in there, just sort of saying, like, take the lane, be in the middle, expect a bike in the middle of the lane. But really, that's why we ended up designing these bypasses as well. So the bike lane would come up here, and if you really wanted to, you could take the lane and go through, or you just very easily, very smoothly get onto the side and do a bypass. It's a little bit longer, but it's you are separated and protected, and you don't have to deal with the traffic. The only other thing you may have to do is to allow cyclists to bike across the crosswalks is just have a bylaw allowing that, which is completely feasible under the Motor Vehicle Act, to allow cyclists to cross ride.
Thanks. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, thank you very much, Nadine. And We'll move on to Shelley Ashfield now, and she's going to talk to us about the Transportation Master Plan update. The floor is yours, Shelley.
Okay. Do I have full access of the?
Yeah, only one screen can be shared at a time. So when Nadine's done sharing, you should be able to share yours, Shelley.
Sorry, I'm trying to unshare here. You know what? I'll just leave the meeting, and that should unshare me. Thank you very much, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You got? Is that working?
Yeah, we
got you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Finally getting this master plan to you. It was completed in February, and it's already June, so I apologize for a bit of a delay there, but here we are. I also have Craig on the line as well, so Craig, feel free to update or provide anything that I've missed or anything that you want to add there. Feel free, or Mayor and Council, if you have any questions as I go along, feel free to interrupt me, or we can wait at the end, whatever you prefer. So just to basically a summary of the Transportation Master Plan, which basically integrates the transportation objectives and policies of the town's official community plan, which is to provide multimodal infrastructure, so that we can reduce dependence on the private motor vehicles and get people to increase their transportation choices by using transit, walking, and cycling, which also reduces greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, our number one priority of doing all of this is safety, and then the level of service that we provide to our community, how we can get people out of their cars. It prolongs the assets of our life, of our assets, also prolongs or the need to have to upgrade up any of our infrastructure, putting in 2 lanes to a 4-lane, turning lanes, so it kind of assists with infrastructure upgrades that we need. It also helps with traffic calming, because the more activity you have on a road where you have people that are walking or cyclists, has a tendency to reduce speed. So also provides healthy community in overall. So a slew of benefits of having a good transportation master plan in place. To give you a bit of a background, Nadine hit on a little bit. In 2011, basically we had the comprehensive study that was done. We did that in concert with the OCP, the town's official community plan, where we really engaged the public. We had surveys that were done, we had stakeholder meetings, and it was quite a bit more comprehensive in the 2020 transportation plan that we just completed. That was more of an update to make sure that our capital planning and our infrastructure, feeds into our asset management, that everything was basically in line, that we're on cue. So that's what transpired in 2020. We looked at the different horizons. What's the current level of service compared to the 5-year horizon, 10-year horizon, and the 20-year horizon, so that we can make sure that our capital planning and infrastructure is set for the long term, so that we can really plan forward for that. I just kind of broke down all the different categories, which basically is in line with the transportation report that's that you have as part of your agenda. So and I thought I'd just throw on that picture of the of those exchanges that things could be a lot worse. I'm not sure where it was taking, but I'm glad I'm not driving that interchange. This slide here just kind of shows you basically the annual daily traffic of the traffic that we have on our roads. And then that provides the road classification for the roads that we have in the town, which are classified from our local roads, which are less than 1,000 vehicles per day. We have our minor collector roads, which are greater than 1,000 vehicles per day. Major collectors are between 3,000 and 5,000, and arterials are greater than 5,000 vehicles per day. So you can see the red highlighted, which is Guthrie, Comox Avenue, and Anderton, which are the red arterials, which have greater than 5,000. Actually, those are greater than 10,000 vehicles per day. So not surprising there, that's our arterial roads. And then you have the major collectors where you can see most of the blue, Guthrie, Anderton, Comox Avenue downtown, and then the minor collector, Rob, Church, you have Torrance and Balmoral as well. So the traffic volumes have interestingly stayed consistent from 2000 to now. On most of the roads, some of the locations basically had a growth from 0 to 1%, and other locations actually showed a decline in some of the traffic volumes. So quite interesting, but nice to see that nothing's too alarming where we have, you know, major shift. There wasn't much development over the last 10 years, so things kind of stayed in line, which is kind of what we were wanting to just confirm with the 2020 update.
And just as we go through this, Council, if there's anything you want to slow down and talk about, please feel free to do so. Shell, if you wanted to go back just one slide real quick.
Yeah. Nope, sorry. By the way.
Yeah. So, you know, what this does show is that our roads are being used how they're intended to be used and how you would expect them to be used, which is a positive sign.
Mm-hmm. This is an interesting table that I thought I'd put into the presentation that's from the study. Basically, it's just showing you the level of service of our major intersections, arterial roads and major collectors. They're ranked, actually these ones aren't ranked in any particular order, but it basically goes from our existing level of service to the 5-year, 10-year, and the 21 horizon. So you can see as development happens and as growth happens, how is the level of service for those intersections being changed. Most are very consistent. Actually, all of them, a couple, the Comox Rodello, there's an improvement there, and I'll kind of get into the improvements that we're going to be doing there in the next slide. And you can see that the majority are staying the same. The level of service rates basically is the amount of delay per vehicle for each movement and the entire intersection. So how much is the vehicle waiting to make a movement or a change in some direction. A level of service A basically is representing the best operations, and a level of service E and F. E is for poor, and F is basically a fail, saying that's unpredictable, it's disruptive, and basically unacceptable. So that's kind of your worst is your level of service F. As you can see, we have a number of them. Anderton and Comox Avenue is an F, Comox and Aiken is an F, Comox and Glacier View is an F, and the fourth, Comox and Rodello in E to an F. So those are basically the intersections that basically are highlighting some of the recommendations or proposals of what we can do to improve that level of service. So having this type of information is really good so that we can quantify and better understand sort of the road networks and what some improvements that we can do with some recommended solutions to improve that level of service. This drawing here shows those 4 intersections. They're highlighted in the red, the 3 on Comox Avenue and the 1 at Rob and Anderton. So I just wanted to kind of spatially give you a view of where those locations are. Not surprised that they are on arterial roads where obviously the higher volumes of traffic will be seen on Comox Avenue and Anderton. These are the improvements that are proposed to improve that level of service over the next 20 years. So the Anderton Comox Avenue currently is rated as F, and by 2024, there's some signal timing that we can do to improve that to level of service D or better. and in 2029 put in a westbound 30-meter right turn lane to do an improvement there of level of service C or better.
Shelley, what's involved in making a change to signal timing? Is that something you just go into the computer and do? Is that hardware changes?
Yeah, basically we get the level of service, and the signal review comes from a traffic engineer, like a consultant. So they would come up with a recommended signal timing that they propose, or that would be ideal for that intersection. And then it's just a matter of doing basically hardware upgrades, not upgrades. There's no upgrades needed. It's basically getting RAILEC out, and then they just they put in that timing, the proposed timing, to make the improvements. So pretty easy changes that need to be done to do that, but really has to come from the traffic engineer, because if you improve one level of service of movement, you got to make sure it doesn't have a negative impact on another movement. So that's why you kind of review it. Basically, the traffic consultants have software that they can review and run these models. Synchro is one that they use for the operation at intersections, so that they look at that level of service. And so that's what they would utilize whenever we're looking at any type of signal timing changes.
Yeah, so they'll look at the overall, as Shelley said, the overall operation of the signal, and try and optimize lengths of queues of vehicles that are stopped on any one leg. The reason that Comox and Anderton is failing is because of the length of time that you have to sit on that westbound leg. That signal has been played with over the years. If anybody sat in the intersection, which I'm sure all of you have, you'll notice that the left turn coming from eastbound Comox will turn on halfway through and not at a predictable time necessarily. So that's an example of how you can play with the signal timing to make things work. And it's a pretty simple process once the timing is figured out, just reprogramming the computer that runs the whole system.
Yeah, and they also look at, as well as, like, what volume of traffic is sitting at the queue. Like if it's a really low volume, it might be operating at a level of service E or F, but it might be only impacting 2 cars, which is similar to the Comox Avenue Rodello. Maybe the side streets at Rodello right now having an E and an F, which might only be maybe 2 or 3 cars, but as development happens, Comox Avenue gets busier, that volume will increase and the length of time will increase as well. So that's why it's sort of projected out X amount of years for that. So it's always a balance, right, on the number of vehicles that you're impacting as well.
And Shelley, I have a question as well. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but so looking at these, we'll go right down to Anderton Road and Rob. So it's rated an F. Looking at 2039 to implement a roundabout. So that's quite a ways out. Is there anything in the meantime? Like, would it make sense to put a light there? Would it make sense to put a right turn lane there? Or do we just leave it and see what happens until 2039, which is a long time?
Yeah, so that one's rated as an F currently, mostly to do, I think, with school. Obviously, you have your peak hours in the morning and in the afternoon. So they putting it as an F, there was nothing proposed or recommended to put in the intern position for that. You know, could we advance that and look at that? We could, but I guess putting in the lighting, the cost of that capital infrastructure. I think if you're going to put the lighting, then we would probably just leave the lighting in there, because that would come with a huge expense as well. So, or we can look at advancing it to put the lighting in, but the roundabout was pushed to 2039 mostly to do that. We just don't have the land at this point. So,
right. And so that leads to my next question. When this came out originally back in 2011, 2014 or something, the house that Councillor Bissinger owns had come up for sale about 2 or 3 times since then. And so as we all know, the housing prices are going through the roof. So do we look at opportunities as they come about, or do we wait until 5 years before and then we start socking money away for that? Because, you know, if we had a little foresight back in 2011, we would have snagged that house for probably $200,000. If we wait till 2039, we're probably looking at 1.5 for it. Yeah, well, or 3 million for Alex if she's still on council, so. Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe that's a question to the CAO. Do we have any reserves for those types of things? Are we thinking about that? Yeah,
So
I
we
think-
do, maybe I'll just quickly, we do keep an eye out for it. I think that one just passed all staff's radar at that point. But we do keep looking out, like, you know, for the hospital, we knew we needed the land. Glacier View and Comox Avenue, we know we need the land. So sort of have a concept with that. So that intersection, I think when that house came up for sale, I think it just missed everybody's radar, but typically staff will then present it to the CAO saying, okay, should we move forward with this or not? And unfortunately, I don't remember that house being for sale. So I think it just got missed by a number of us.
Yeah, we were just saying here that I thought that house at Glacier View Drive in Comox Ave is currently for sale, or recently was. I know there has been some development talk about that land, so that could be something down the road. Anyway.
It might be worth, it might be worth us then reaching out to a realtor and just giving them a list of the areas that we're looking at purchasing land, or out to a couple, because I'm sure people will forget, you know, when we're talking about specific properties, but, you know, letting a couple know so that when it does come up, somebody reaches out to us. So it's not just on staff to be aware of when land is for sale.
Okay, thank you.
Part of the concern with it though too would be that we don't have even a conceptual design for the roundabout at Rob and Anderton. So we have no idea how much land it's going to take, what the situation's going to be, like how the roundabout's going to fit in there. It may not be a roundabout this size. It may have to be something that's probably going to have to be something quite a bit smaller. So it may just be little pieces of land that we have to get, and we don't have to take the whole piece of property. Similar to what Nadine presented with the two properties on the north side of Comox Ave at Rodello. It's just little corners that we've got to take off of that too.
Yeah, and you know, just from my own experience of living on Rob, I think it's similar to the issue that we have at Highland School at Pritchard and Guthrie there. It's busy, and in the morning it's when school's opening and when it's closing. Other than that, I don't really have many problems getting off of Rob onto Anderton. So, yeah, exactly. So it's a lot of money for a couple hours. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop talking.
Yeah, because the Guthrie and Pritchard also have a proposed roundabout for that. Basically, all our intersections that need improvements, their first recommendation is to look at a roundabout. I get maybe 2 or 3 complaints, maybe even just 2 of Guthrie and Pritchard on an annual basis that we need to put lights in or change something. But once we have that discussion about, you know, it's just, you know, an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon, exactly like you said, Mr. Mayor, it's quite a bit of an expense to put in to deal with. And even regardless of what we put in, you're still going to have the traffic congestion because of the schools. That's just a reality. So maybe just to carry on with some of these improvements that we have as part of our capital plan, so that we can, make some of these improvements going forward. So timing at the Anderton Comox Avenue intersection, and then the roundabouts for the other 3 intersections moving forward. We had 2029 for Comox Avenue and Rodello and the Glacier View. Councillor Grant had brought it up earlier, which one's more important, and kind of answered that one already. Which one can we put in if we have the land, and what makes sense in regards to development and timing? So right now it is the Comox Rodello Street intersection, and we do have the concept plan for Glacier View. So if that development does occur, we'll be able to then secure the lands that we need at that time. So we're trying to stay ahead of the game. And I think that's in 2014, when we looked at the preliminary design of the Comox Avenue and Rodello intersection, was just so that it was done in 2014. You're probably wondering why we did that one so early, but that one was done so early because we were trying to time it with the hospital. When the hospital was closing at that time, the hospital really wanted to, I think, get something in the ground like the year after. So we figured things would be moving pretty fast at that property. So we were trying to stay ahead of the game, so we knew exactly what land we would need. So that's why that one's been sitting for the last number of years, and also to have a couple that we can be shovel ready and grant ready if something does come up, so that we can move forward on that as well. So we're probably looking at, yeah, the Anderton Rob will be probably the next one that we can at least starting preliminary design of what makes sense to move there. Like, we probably wouldn't wait till 2039. We'll probably get that rolling a little bit sooner of what that could look like in the next number of years. So any other questions on this slide?
I have a question, Shelley. I guess you kind of answered it, but I guess it's what I've always thought is that it would have been made more sense to do the Glacier View Aitken roundabout first. It's the entrance to the town. And it always has been a problem coming off Glacier View Drive there for years. And it seems to have more traffic than the other ones. And that way we would be solving two roadways that are rated F. And I know it's kind of been historic and we've always kind of gone with that mindset, but I'm wondering if that is still going to be the case once the Aspen development is up and running, and whether more traffic is going to be drawn down there sooner. I guess it's a bit of a guessing game for us, but I've always thought it would make more sense to do the Glacier View one first. So I don't know if it's really a question, more of a comment.
Yeah, I mean, they're both, I think, very important to get done. I think one will help the other for sure. You know, having a roundabout anywhere on Comox Avenue will help, I think, traffic. So, you know, all the road network south of Comox Avenue, you know, your Beach, your Ellis, Rodello, they can all come to the roundabout to turn left and get onto Comox Avenue. And then on the north side, you know, if you're on those side streets, they can at least get to Rodello and get onto the roundabout. So, you know, maybe it'll take some of the traffic load off of Glacier View once the roundabout is in at that location, so that we'll have less volume there, or people coming from 695 Aspen, if they want to get downtown or Comox Avenue, you know, will go to that intersection knowing they'll be able to have those movements. So I can see the volume of traffic increasing once the roundabout is in place, so that people are aware that they can have easier movement to get, you know, in and out of that intersection. You know, they did look at 695 Aspen with that growth. It's kind of a predict, you know, trying to judge where the traffic's going to go. It didn't seem to influence it over the next 20 years, as you saw from my level of service of that intersections. I think they're F all the way through anyway. So there's nothing higher than F, so I don't know what the impact is going to be. But, and the other thing is that we just don't have the land for Glacier View. So, you know, if we had the land for both, and we can choose which one can go first at the exact same time, you know, maybe we could probably look at having a further deeper analysis of what that traffic volume and everything could look like. But because Rodello and Comox Avenue, we can move forward, we've got the land, that's the one that we're choosing or recommending that we go sooner with.
Okay, thank you.
This table here, it's table 5. So it looks at basically the accident table or a collision table, if you will. So it ranks them from highest to lowest. This is data that's collected from 2007 to 2017 inclusive. So it provides you with a total number of collisions over the 10 years, as well as the annual collision frequency. You can see that Anderton, Comox, and Anderton and Guthrie have the higher number of collisions, which basically is also looking at our 2011 data is an actual increase of 18%. Not surprising, because those are major intersections where we have a higher number of movements at those intersections, where you have, you know, multiple lanes turning. And I think what Nadine mentioned is intersections, you have an increase of 16 conflict points. So not surprised that we're seeing higher collision rates at those intersections. The collision rates are throughout the town of Comox are at a 40% below average of the provincial average. So that's good. And we're only looking at 2017 at this point. When we did the traffic study, we started it in 2019, but we get data from ICBC every year, so we can look at the collisions. So that provides us some good data and criteria as we move forward at the intersections. This table or this slide is the traffic calming. In September of 2018, Council adopted the traffic calming policy, which is based on best management practices in Canada. And the purpose of the traffic calming policy is basically to manage the community traffic calming requests that come in. And if they're appropriate, if they're transparent, basically, so we're all on the same page in regards to the criteria that we look at, how we do it, what are the steps, how do we consider it. So it kind of just, provides us all with a tool that we can manage these requests as they come in. More will come of this traffic calming policy once I kind of get into the holistic report that Council had a resolution on earlier this year, so that I can address some speeding. So I'll look and review the speed limits at that time and maybe come up, I haven't gave it any thought, but come up to Council with maybe of what that could look like, and then the costs associated with reducing potentially the speed limit. Craig had sent me not too long ago a clip that that the city of Calgary just reduced their local roads to a 40 km/h throughout, and that came in, I think, at a cost of $2.3 million for them to implement. So it does come with costs. So hopefully, yeah, I'll have more to Mayor and Council on that when I start preparing the report on reducing traffic speed in the town of Comox. There's a number of things that staff have done to limit speeds in the town of Comox, where we reduce the cross sections of our local roads to 6 meters, where we have the parking bulbouts, so that you don't have basically a 9-meter wide road. The wider the road is, the higher the speeds will be. We purchased 2 additional speed radar boards. We requested some more, some ICB funding to help fund those. You can see in the picture there, that's the one on Bolt Avenue. These speed radar boards are very effective. Getting a lot of good feedback from the community on having them. And in the transportation plan, they also suggested this is the best, one of the really good effective tool to have in reducing speed limits. So currently we have 3, and then with the purchase of the new one, we'll have 4. So we've been concentrating a lot on school zones and playgrounds for the 30 km/h speed limits throughout the town. And from the policy or from the transportation report, there was a couple of recommendations that were done or that are made in regards to traffic calming. The one is to update our policy. It was done in 2018, but just to make sure it's current with the best guidelines. So I'll review that as part of the report that I'll be presenting to Council this year. And then the recommendations also included a number of roads. There was 4 roads that were highlighted as being identified as potential candidates for traffic calming, that the 85th percentile of the speeds were traveling 10 km/h over the posted speed limit. So that was Glacier View Drive, south of Strathcona Crescent, Knoll Avenue, east of Spitfire, basically near Condor Park, Guthrie Road at Brooklyn Elementary School, and then the Knoll Avenue during school zones, school hours. This slide here kind of shows you visually where those 4 locations are. So the Glacier View south of Strathcona is in this location. This is just at the threshold. The speeds basically the speed limits that we've been getting, or the speeds that we've been getting on this, was just at 60 km/h. So it was just hitting that 10 kilometers over the posted limit. We did some improvements along this stretch of the road in 2014, where we put in the shared bike lanes. We put in the bell belts and the islands in there as well, so that we can reduce the travel lanes down. It made an improvement. It was over 60 kilometers per hour prior to the road upgrades, and then now we're just at 60. One of the recommendations or what staff is proposing to do is put up the speed radar boards for a period of time, and then seeing if that can make a difference. Or that would, the 60 kilometers per hour limit was in 2019, so I wouldn't mind putting those traffic tubes out again, and then seeing what's happening currently right now for 2021. So some ideas or suggestions that we're going to be looking at, so making some improvements there. Knoll Avenue, basically from Pritchard to Torrance, fronting Gallardi School. That speed limit was captured just before the Knoll Avenue upgrades. So that was prior to the bike lanes, the parking, and the sidewalk on the north side. So really formalizing that stretch of road. So we should, might probably too late this year, but I would like to do it. Well, obviously we'll do it in September or October, and get the traffic tubes out there again, and seeing what the traffic is doing now after the improvements are that we've upgraded that road, so we can get a better idea of what's happening there. So we'll see what's coming out of that. But we will.
Shelley?
Yep.
With that, is there any thought of the area east of Torrance there? Because I've been fielding some complaints, and I know I steered someone on to you about that as well. But you know, from Torrance all the way to Guthrie, people are speeding in that area. So bring it to my attention. So is that something you're going to put those tubes down?
We were going to put them at Knoll Avenue. I think, Craig, do you remember? I believe we did do some traffic counts along here, and traffic was within speed limits.
I don't recall. I live in that area. I don't notice anything when I'm out walking, but that doesn't mean I'm seeing everything that goes on all day.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I'll put
Just an area of concern.
Yeah, I did answer a few questions in regards to, I think, the parking, on-street parking, and I think the crosswalk and the sight lines.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah, I don't recall it being speeding, but I'll have a look and I'll see what we have for the data, and then we can, easily throw out the tubes there and get some data collected there to see what's happening.
Okay.
Yeah, we have 3 sets of tubes, Craig?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are really easy to install. So that's definitely the number one thing that when complaints come in or people are inquiring about the speed on their road, we put out the tubes, and it provides us some good background of what's happening. And then we can actually then monitor, do the improvements, put the tubes back out after the fact, and then see how those had an impact on the speed. So definitely a great tool to have at a staff level. And then same with Knoll Avenue. No, sorry. On Guthrie, fronting Brooklyn School, we had quite a bit of complaints, probably starting in 2019, that we did the crosswalk improvements just east of the school. The PAC and the school really wanted the speed or the pedestrian beacons put up, but it didn't really meet the criteria, and what was recommended and proposed by Watt Engineering was basically to reduce that travel lane, put in the bell belts, and put the refuge island in. That was the better treatment for that location, which we installed last year, and made a huge improvement. It just has that visual for drivers just to slow down as you approach it, and got some really positive comments back from the PAC and the school of the improvements that the town had implemented there. So, and we also put the speed radar boards in this location on and off throughout the year as well. So I think, we'll get some more traffic tubes out there, so then that we can at least measure what's happening with the speed limit, or not speed limit, but how it's happening with the speeds now that the improvements were put in at that crosswalk. The speeding on Knoll Avenue, basically fronting Condor Park. The long-term recommendation, I can't remember what year it is, but to put in, sidewalks, bring in as much facilities in there to make it busier, reducing that, pavement width as well. And make an improvement. I think it might be in 2029 to do these improvements. Or the other suggestion was to put the speed radar boards in this location as well for the intern. So those are the four basically plans that the staff is willing or going to look at in regards to improving these locations for traffic calming.
I just did a quick search on our files. So the traffic tubes were put out between Torrance and Butchers back in May of 2019, and we had a 85th percentile speed of 51. So it's not too bad in that area. Just to your question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that's great.
And this slide basically is just highlighting the cycling and greenway network. Just highlighted here that to date we have 8 kilometers of dedicated bike lanes within the town of Comox. Actually, of our 100.5 kilometers of road, we basically have 30 kilometers of bike lanes, bike routes, or shared bike lanes. So that's 30% of providing a cycling modal transportation for the community, which is quite high, which is great. The study recommended a number of improvements to the cycling and greenway network. The first one is to put in buffered bicycle lanes for arterials and our major collectors where the volume of traffic is much higher. Unbuffered, more for our collector roads and our local and rural roads. And then the greenway multi-use path along Dryden Road in Cambridge, and the Lazo multi-use path from Forster to Guthrie, which you're all aware of. This picture here basically shows you what I mean when I say buffered bike lanes. So this is the one on Knoll Avenue where we have the 0.3 meter hatched. So it's just an additional visual for the cyclist and the vehicles. And then we also have it on the inside as well if we have cars parked as well, just to provide that additional visual for both the cyclists and the motorists. This is the map of basically all of our future and existing bike infrastructure in the town, and you can see it's quite busy. We have lots going on, from bike lanes to widening our shoulders to shared bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, unbuffered bike lanes. So quite a detailed plan moving forward. The other two multi-use paths that I was talking about, this is the one on Lazo, starting at the Guthrie intersection down to Forster. So that's in our 2021 design capital plan. Andrew's working on that RFP right now, and which will be a great regional multi-use path. We're working very closely with the Ministry of Transportation in the Comox Valley Regional District to continue that multi-use path through the Lazo Marsh area as well. And you're also familiar with the shoulder widening that the Ministry of Transportation did last year along the Lazo portion here for the 1.5 meter shoulder, so improving the cycling infrastructure there. And you're all aware of the RFP that just closed for the improvements along Lazo Road, basically from the town's boundary, right stretch to just west of Knight Road, or Kaibe, yeah. So that will be a nice regional connection if you will. Yeah.
So Shelley, with that, if you, yeah, go back there. From Kaide Road west to towards the airport, I know that's the Ministry of Transport, but are you hearing any scuttlebutt that they're going to do that? Because that's a horrible road for cyclists. Like the shoulder drops, it's about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 8 inches. It's dangerous. And so I'm just wondering if you're hearing anything, if there's something that we can do to push. I guess it'd be Minister, I'm not sure which minister, but we could check into that. But is there anything on that?
This section here?
No, on Knight Road.
Oh,
Yeah,
this-
that area. Yeah, towards the airport.
Yeah, so it's part of the Ministry of Transportation when they did this upgrade. This is their next section that they were I thought they were gonna do it this year. But they do have that on their plan. Like, you know, we've been working with them for the last number of years to try to get this loop. It's a really highly popular cycling route. Yeah, we did push with that with the ministers a couple years back. So I haven't heard if, I don't think they're moving forward. I know they were thinking about it. Since I haven't heard anything, I'm thinking they're not.
Right.
But we'll continue putting pressure on them. But they do have it on their plans for sure.
Okay, thanks. And Councillor McKenna, did I see your hand up?
Yeah,
you
did.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Super interesting presentation tonight, by the way, for all of staff. Thank you. The cut and cover that we're doing on the sewer route, it also has an unbuffered kind of bike lane. Will we be trying to do something a little more safe for the cyclists on that route?
Which route?
On the Beaufort.
On Beaufort? We have from Beaufort, I mean, we can get into the conveyance and the routing. I think we're going to walk it later. But
I guess my question is, when we're done, sewers, you know, through, et cetera, or whatever, the routes decided, everything's cut, put back together. Will there be a nicer bike? It's kind of sketchy right now. The bike lane is sketchy. I use that bike lane quite a bit, and there's not a lot of traffic on the road, thankfully, but it's still a bit of a sketchy bike lane.
Yeah, so we're definitely going as part of the review of the conveyance and coming through the town. If they're going to be removing asphalt and repaving it, we're looking at upgrading it to our standards. So if it's on a classification of a road that's calling for a dedicated bike lane, we'll work with them to hopefully get that as the final product moving forward. Yeah. So that's going to be, that'll be part of, once we're done the preliminary design, we'll take staff will take that route, we'll take the route of the conveyance through, and then we'll look at and compare what we have in our capital project plans, what are our asset management plans, and then we can highlight what the improvements need to be along that route. The other recommendation that they had here was the greenway or the multi-use path from Dryden Road to Cambridge Road, which is up in this location. This is Dryden, and is this right? No.
No, that's Guthrie, further up.
Further up here, sorry. So this is Dryden, and then we have Hudson coming down here. I don't have the road on here for whatever reason. The regional district put in the sanitary regional line there, the Hudson trunk, a number of years ago. So we have, and this is a road, but this section they highlighted as a good multi-use path to basically connect the city of Courtenay, sort of a regional, multimodal path that we can kind of cut right across to Torrance and basically, and that comes across on Cambridge and tie it into Northeast Woods. There's quite a bit of residential in this area as well. Knight Road is not upgraded to standards, so it could be quite dangerous and dark. to ride or walk. So having that linkage as well to come on Hutton Road, link it onto this multi-use path, and either come through, if you want to go into the town, come straight down south through the Highwood subdivision, or you can just come on to Pritchard Road as well, or link it into Northeast Comox, hook into the Lazo foreshore area as well. This has been on capital projects for a number of years. There's a little bit of land that's required in this section, this small little section. We don't have road dedication and SRW, so we're trying to secure that land. Our water main stops somewhere around here, and then it stops at the end of Cambridge Road as well. So we want to loop that water main at the same time. That's kind of what's driving it as well, so that we can just improve the water quality in this whole, within that section of the water system. So that would be a really nice, regional linkage as well, if we can, move that forward. I have it in our 2021 capital plan to secure that land so that we can move it forward. So that's that multi-use path whenever you see the Dryden Cambridge Road linkage there. So that was a recommendation from the Greenway network from the study. The pedestrian network. The nice thing about our pedestrian network, we have a good one. We don't have sidewalks on both sides of our roads, but we definitely have sidewalks on at least one side of our road for all of our arterial and major collector roads. So that's good. It's really important, I think, to have that pedestrian connectivity. So when you're on a sidewalk, it doesn't just end, that you're able to at least cross the road and get onto safe infrastructure as a pedestrian. I didn't include this pedestrian network. It's quite busy, but they have a number of proposed roads where they where the transportation study recommended improving them or installing them, based on volumes of traffic, based on volume of pedestrians. Is, fronting schools, is it near schools, is it community center, downtown, complexes, multifamily development. So there's a number of improvements that's highlighted in there in the report. I highlighted here for improvements for basically crosswalk improvements that they recommended for the next 10 years. Brooklyn School mid-block crosswalk, I kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, that the Brooklyn School were recommending something be done in regards to crossing Guthrie Road. Anderton and Robb, the flashing pedestrian beacons that were also already installed in 2020. Comox Avenue and Pritchard Road, some improvements that are happening there. That's basically right by the Philburg. It's almost like a 90-degree turn as you're coming around, and we have that crosswalk. So to do some improvements, we have that. It said by 2024, but it's in our capital plan for 2021. So Craig and I were just discussing that project a little bit earlier today. So hopefully we can make some improvements for for the pedestrian crosswalk at that location. And the other one is the Anderton and Bolt, putting in some pedestrian activated lights in that location by 2029. And that could be another ICBC potential funding candidate.
Question?
Sure, yeah.
I don't know if the right thing would be to decommission a crosswalk, but that one by the Bamboo Inn, I know we've talked about it before on Beach and Comox Ave. That's a brutal crosswalk, especially in the winter. I don't know if there's ever been accidents or injuries there, but it's really dark, really brutal. If we do the roundabout, it might solve things. It's only a block or so away. We could maybe get rid of it, but are there any plans to make that one a little bit safer in the interim?
Yeah, that's a great question and comment. And the reason that crosswalk was put in at that location is because it is to have that pedestrian sidewalk connectivity, because we didn't have the sidewalk. We don't have a sidewalk on the south side of Comox Avenue. Hopefully we'll be successful with the grant and that we can put in the sidewalk on the south side of Comox Avenue. And then so we can make that linkage. typically, from what I got from consulting engineers, is that you typically don't, once a sidewalk or basically even a crosswalk, once those are installed, it's hard to remove them. Obviously, the public get used to them, the public wants them there, so they don't recommend removing them. But I think that is definitely, if we can get that sidewalk put in on the south side of Comox Avenue, I don't think the need, and I think the safety concerns of it is kind of outweighs the need to have it. So I think that has a good justification of potentially looking at removing it. So that I would definitely consider that, and maybe, you know, running it by a traffic consulting engineer to see if it makes sense to have that one removed just based on safety.
Yeah, and I think I asked this question before, but it's about 30-40 grand for the flashy light thing, right? Like to wire it up and
no, I believe it's about 20,000.
okay.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
one we did at Rob last year came to about 20.
Right, so it's still quite expensive. It's sure just a dangerous spot, that one.
We had most of that covered by ICBC last year. So from a funding point of view, it didn't really hit the bottom line all that much. There is concern about putting them in all sorts of places. And I know Courtney has gone and they've blanketed the town or their city with these flashing lights. Part of the concern from a traffic point of view is if you get too many of them, people start ignoring them, kind of like a stop sign or no parking signs or no parking or no stopping signs and stuff like that. So what we try and do is get recommendations and get the feedback from the traffic engineers on where they make sense. Within the Transportation Association of Canada, there are recommendations and guidelines on where to put them and certain numbers of vehicles and pedestrians that it's essentially a test that we would do, or a warrant, they call it. We would look at, do a traffic count, do a pedestrian count as well, and understand how many people are using that intersection, and based on those numbers, whether or not it's warranted to have that crosswalk there or upgraded. One of the things that they would look at is proximity of other crosswalks as well. So if we are successful with this grant and we get the sidewalk, Anderton and Comox at a signalized intersection is 50 meters or so down the road. That's well within that typical distance where Transportation Association of Canada recommends not having duplicate crosswalks. So that would be an argument to take it out, actually.
Thank you.
And then with the Rodello or the roundabout going in as well, that'll be a safer crossing. So I think that's good from block to block, and we can remove that well, it's not a mid block, I guess, because it actually is a T intersection, but I agree. That's definitely one we should review once we get the other infrastructure in place. Yeah, this is just a picture of the pedestrian activated signals on Rob that were installed in 2020. Transit basically, well, we continue to see some improvements with CVRD. They're actually coming to do a presentation to council, I believe, next week to talk mostly about the exchange, but kind of give you an update a little bit on some of the infrastructure that they have planned for BC for transit. And basically just continue to work with CVRD and provide input on that service as things improve or that we move along. I sit on the Transportation Management Advisory Committee, which has a number of all the jurisdictions participating on that, City of Courtney and Cumberland, myself, and the town and the regional areas as well. So we'll continue making improvements on that as we move forward. We have in the budget $90,000 that council approved to put up more bus shelters as well. So we'll have a deep review of that. We have already started it in-house to see and working with CVRD and our provider and seeing where the higher number of transit users are at and what locations that don't have the transit shelters, so that we can, kind of come up with a criteria of some sort to prioritize which ones get installed first. The next slide is the TDM, Transportation Demand Management. Basically, just references what different types of policies, programs, services that we can put in place so that we can influence people to, travel with transit or bicycles, walking, all different types of travel modes to just get people out of their cars. They, suggested the study suggested that the town look at maybe putting some efforts into, doing some sort of transit pass programs, long-term bicycle facilities, bicycle parking, and maybe even some payment in lieu of parking. You can see I have a picture here of some bike lockers that are installed at the Comox Mall. So that's great for their users and trying to get as many of their employees to maybe bike to work. The other was to work with facilities, or as development happens, that they provide shower facilities for their employees as well, so that they can look at alternate modes of transportation. The other emerging, obviously, is the e-mobility services that we have. So currently 55% of the total greenhouse gas emissions come from of the Comox Valley. So, if we can promote as much electrical transportation options as we can is good. Electric vehicles, bikes and scooters. Electrical bikes have been booming for sure, which is a good thing. And then the electric vehicles as well. We installed the 3 EV stations in town, Town Hall, Fire Hall, and the mall in 2020. I don't think they're being used as much as we hoped right now. And I think it's because of COVID. Everybody's working from home. Not a lot of people are traveling, so the numbers are a little bit down, but hopefully that'll turn around pretty quick. We also have a 4th EV station that will be being put in town. We're probably looking at the community center as the 4th. I don't know if council recalls or not, but in forget what year it was, 2019, I guess it was, that council made the motion to work with the Mid-Island EV charging network station or community. It's, I think, being basically it's for spearheaded with this regional district of Nanaimo. So they're just looking at putting the RFP. We did get the grant money for that. So they're looking at putting the RFP out maybe in June or July. So that includes the number of stations. I think there's, well, gosh, at least 20 or more total for, all the local governments that went in together on this grant. District of Nanaimo, the city of Nanaimo, there's Camel River, Cumberland, Comox. So depending on when the contractor, what contractor is successful, and then timing on when that will get installed in the town is unknown, but probably within the next couple of years. It could be sooner. They could just take the sort of the low-lying hanging fruit and say, okay, we'll just deal with these municipalities, or we can be coming near the end. But just so council knows, that is still moving forward, and then we'll be getting that 4th EV station sometime in the near future.
Okay, Shelley, got a couple questions here, Councillor Grant and Minions.
Sure.
Yeah, Shelley, do we have a plan on where we put our electric car charge stations, or do we just kind of pick them as we go? And secondly, does it make sense to cluster them and put a whole bunch in one spot? So if you were to go, you'd actually know you were gonna, or have a pretty good guess that you were gonna get a charge. Like if you put one at the rec center, for example, and somebody goes in there for a couple hours, they either didn't get on it, or they clog it up for a couple of hours at a time. So I'm just wondering if there's some plan for where we put them, and if you put like 5 of them all at one spot, so everybody knew where to go, and you could pretty much guarantee you'd get on one. I'm not sure if that's the best way. I'm just wondering.
So we did try to come up with some sort of plan that seemed to make sense and have a bit of logic, and putting them where people could be charging their vehicles and making use of their time, or that they would be put that at location for a reason, like Comox Mall. They can charge their vehicles and go shopping, or go out for dinner or for lunch, have some coffee. So drawing them to the downtown, or seeing that there be more, people in that area. Town Hall was another location. For visitors coming to Town Hall, it's still close to downtown. If the two at the mall are busy, we have the Marina Park located in that area as well. So really high volumes of people coming in that area. Fire Hall was chosen. We were hoping for the community center because people, they rent out the rooms for a number of events, or just people wanting to work out or coming in from out of town or just coming in from the community can charge there as well. So another location where you have higher volumes of people gathering. So we're trying to disperse them out a little bit, but at locations where you'd see higher number of people. Speaking at the mall, we put in the 2 and the mall is certainly willing to work with the town to put in 2 more in the future if that need comes up, if the use of it is being used and the need is to put in more, they would absolutely. And basically we both sort of agree that it's probably going to happen one day. I think it's just going to get busier and busier with electric vehicles. So that's kind of the thought and the plan that was put forward of the locations that we chose.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I'm wondering if the 4th one that's going in that was part of that regional grant, will that be a level 2 charger or will it be, I'm assuming it's not like the level 3 supercharger. Do we know what level that one that's going in or 2 that are going in will be?
Yeah, it's the level 2.
Okay, and just are the other, I think there's 4 in town now, they're all level 1, correct?
They're all level 2.
Okay. I was reading through like the amount of charge that should be happening, and I've heard myself with the experience of using them and other people, they're not charging to that level. So I'm not sure. I've only heard a couple people in their vehicles be the same, but you're getting like between 4 and 5 kilometers an hour, which is more like a level 1. So I don't know. Maybe I need to go try them all one day and recheck that. But I was thinking that might have been one of the reasons, because by the time you chart, you take the 5 minutes to get charged and then you pay the $1, which is not a really big deal at all. It was I'm not finding that they're charging up fast. So just feedback, or I'll go try them again and see if anything's changed in the last 6 months.
Yeah, definitely let us know, and we can definitely get charge point out or have a look if they're not charging what they're supposed to be doing. I haven't heard. This is the first I heard of that. So keep me posted and we can definitely have somebody look at that. And that was sort of maybe just a quick in regards to Councillor Grant mentioned, if they're going into the rec center and taking up the space, and that was kind of the rationale that we presented to council at the time in regards to charging a rate or not, so that people don't just park there and then leave their vehicle there for 5 or 6 hours. I don't know if anybody would ever work out that long, but they could certainly be at the mall that long, potentially, just so that we can get them moving their vehicles as their charging is complete. So that was sort of the rationale. And that's what we're hearing from a lot of the other municipalities who don't have a rate. They're definitely going to that in the future, just so that they can get more vehicles moving through the EV stations.
Yeah, I really think that maybe with some integration with Courtney and what they're doing, and figuring out a really good plan for where we put these, because I know they're putting one at the rink in Courtney, and honestly, if you go to play hockey, you're there for 2.5 hours. You either get on the thing and charge your car, and then you're there and you've blocked it off for the better part of half a day, or you don't get on because somebody else is doing that. So I just question where you go to some of these places in the rec center. You go in there for a minimum of an hour at a time. You're not going to come running out and move your car around. That's just not going to happen. So I don't know the right answer. I just think that you got to really think about it maybe before you just put them in some of those areas. And I know, like in Courtney, they were just kind of putting them where they thought, and on 5th Street again, parking, you're not going to come and move your car just because you think your charge is done. So I think, that's why I think of putting a whole whack of them in one spot might be an idea, but it's just my thoughts.
Okay, and also we had Councillor McKenna's hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was just, you probably don't want to put one in front of the Church Street Tap House because they might be in there a long time. And the question I have around the EV chargers is, are they regulated like a gas pump would be? Like, do people have to come in and audit them and test them and make sure that they work? Back to Councillor Minion's question on whether ours are that in particular are working the way it's supposed to.
I don't think we have anything in regulated in that at that level. I think it's just a matter of service and dealing with complaints or errors that pop up, or as we know. So I don't think it's like something that's regulated that they come in yearly, to do anything. It's just a matter of, if we find any problems or have an error, or that we can get somebody up to have a look.
Yeah, and that's probably good because it would be costly if we had a bunch of them and then all of a sudden they mandate like these crazy third-party inspections or et cetera. Thanks.
Yeah. And just so council is aware as well, probably about 2 weeks ago, I attended basically a 3-day, part-time e-mobility workshop. It was funded by BC Hydro in the city of Campbell River. That included many municipalities on the island, so that we can kind of start that conversation and share that vision of what e-mobility can look like on the island for the 2040 target, just so that we have a bit of consistency from one municipality to other. So it was quite interesting. I think there was over 68 participants on it. So it was nice just to collaborate with other municipalities and stakeholders on the island. So it's good that, they had started that conversation. Some of the recommendations that came from the study, to expand the EV charging network that we have, provide the EV parking, which already provided a summary on that. Exploring these basically are looking at our zoning bylaw to include requirements for electric bike parking within some of the development areas as well. I know a number of them have obviously the EV charging stations, and then, work, the Councillor Grant had mentioned, work with the City of Courtenay and the CVRD into making sure that we're kind of consistent, and for other possibilities or programs that we can put in place in the future. And the pavement management plan is also probably one of the key components that we have as part of the transportation study that we do, so that we can obviously provide staff systematic approach and a level of service that we can provide to the community, that then we can present back to council and come up with our 5-year capital plan. Definitely feeds into that, as well as our asset management plan, and then helping us prepare and looking at what roads need maintenance or repair, that we can prolong the lifespan of some of that infrastructure. So, important that we do these studies, within every 5 to 10 years, so that we can stay up to date and current. A lot can happen in a road, especially if the sub base starts deteriorating, and then all of a sudden you can see a huge decline pretty quick. So these are basically done visually. The town has done in 2011 and 2020. There's a lot of technology out there that you can really do analysis of the surface and the sub base, and really give you some good results, although that comes at a cost as well. The visual right now seems to be working and providing us good guidelines in regards to that level of service that we want to provide the community. I said earlier that this one is a big component to the transportation study. And basically it shows you on this slide 60% of our cost of the $52 million over the next 20 years comes to resurfacing our roadways. So that's a huge cost. So it provides Craig and his team, to look at the maintenance and the repair that we can do. And see from this picture of our crack sealing program, which we do annually. It's quite an extensive program that we do, so that we can prolong the life of which road, and what makes sense. Once you get into a lot more crack sealing, that's more of a cost. So it's quite a balance for sure. but it's definitely a key component because like you see, it's 60% of the cost. This averages out about, was it $2.1 million per year of improvements. The remainder of the 52 million comprises of sidewalks and roundabouts that are proposed, new sidewalks or upgrades, replacements at a 75% percentage, and then greenway and bike lanes are 23%, and then traffic calming that currently at 2%. So just sort of a breakdown of the capital planning and funding for the next 20 years.
So Shelley, do you know, if you were to average out over the last 5 or 10 years, how much would we be spending now on an annual basis? Because I take your 53 million and divide it by 20, and it comes to about 2.6 million a year, which, I mean, if you say it fast, it isn't that much. But but we have nothing to compare it to. So I don't know what we're currently spending to see if that's a big upgrade or.
We typically, I try to balance that out every time we do our financial plan of the 5 years. And it's not just traffic, but our whole capital plan, and that's storms, sewer, and water. I'm usually about, or I try to average about $3 million per year. If we have a huge project that's coming in, say if we do a roundabout and we're at 1.5 or 1.2, Knoll Avenue was over $1 million, that kind of would bump it up a little bit more if we have a major upgrade road. But on average, I think it's about 3 million. Some might, some years might go down to 2.5, 2.7, and then some might be just over 3 million. But that would probably be a safe average that we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for all these capital ones that you're talking about here, 2.6 isn't really far off the mark then on an average basis.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's a little bit high because that 3 million, like I said, had to deal with storm and water and sewer. Right. But yeah, I don't think it's too far off for sure. And that, that just over 2 million a year, that's where Craig and I will look at in a little bit more detail and say, okay, we can push this one off if we do some more programming or crack sealing program. We can probably save it for another 3, 4, 5 years, or certain maintenance that we could do on the road. So when we get the recommendations from the traffic study, we just take it that next step, and then we go out at a staff. We do it every year, basically, when you do our financial plan, go back out and say, okay, they're saying the level of service for this road, is poor. Let's have a closer look. Is it poor? Can we get, maybe 2 or 3 more years out of it without, compromising the sub base or compromising at that, 2 or 3 years time, it's going to cost us, double the price. So it's kind of that balance that we take moving forward.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to get a feel for whether we were in the right ballpark with what we're currently doing as opposed to what the recommendations are or not. But it seems like we're reasonable anyway.
Yeah. And it kind of, it's important, and I like, having sort of a third party come in or a consultant where, they just focus on the community at large, looking at our roads, our transportation, our bikes and, traffic calming and pedestrian access. They look at it, holistically as a whole, and they come up with, prioritizing some of these capital plans. Sometimes we get, well, not so much anymore, but get asked for people on, I want my road paved, or I need a sidewalk in front of my house, or I would like to have traffic calming, we should have a bike lane in front of my house. So, it puts staff in a good position that we can, we have a plan that comes in that prioritizes what makes sense for the community as large, that we can sort of have those unbiased recommendations or proposal where it makes sense. And, we would love to have infrastructure in front of everybody's, neighborhoods and streets. But we just kind of look at what volume of traffic there are, volumes of pedestrian safety, level of service for the whole town. So it's kind of nice once we, lots of times when we say, well, based on the traffic study, the proposal for your road to get service is this year. So it just kind of helps us provide that feedback to the community when these requests come in. And I think that's all I have. Anybody has any other questions or want to see any other slides?
Any other questions from council? Well, you're off the hook, Shelley. Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. That was a big report there we had, so appreciate your time.
Great, thank you.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, these types of reports are something that get filed away and then staff refers back to them quite often, when we're getting into budgeting processes and planning out, we come back to these. So one thing to keep in mind is just remember these are council's documents. They are the blueprint for which you provide the staff and how we're going to continue planning the city. So when you have the time and you're going through these, if there's things you're uncomfortable about, you don't quite understand, or you'd like changed, let's make sure we talk about it and make those changes so that when we're getting into planning, we know the direction council wants to head.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and thanks again, Craig, Shelley, for taking the time on that. All right, we'll move
Russ, can I just ask one question?
on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
No problem. Thanks. I just, and maybe because the report was like 218 pages, I might have missed it, but the Buena Vista, we've had quite a few letters around the traffic calming in Buena Vista and recommendations that were put forward. Did I read correctly that it recommended a sidewalk down Buena Vista, or did it recommend calming measures, or just nothing at all?
Nothing at all.
So this traffic report was done outside of council's direction to take a look at Buena Vista. The work that we're going to be doing to examine speeding will be done, based for the community based on what's here. And then you've also given us direction to look at what can be done on that street as well. And we anticipate bringing that back to you towards the end of this year sometime. We're not quite sure. We're just juggling all the priorities we have right now.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I thought we had not made decisions on Buena Vista because we were waiting on the traffic study, but my error if that's the case.
Yeah, so that's correct. And it was just that once this traffic study was done, I think the language and the direction from council was to take a look at speed throughout the town holistically and bring recommendations back to council on how to address it with a specific focus, or with Buena Vista specifically addressed. So the first piece of that is now done with the study complete, and it's just going to be us getting to the second piece.
Okay, thanks. I just noticed like handmade signs at the intersection of Buena Vista and Church, like U-turns are dangerous, almost every time I walk there, there's a U-turn. Like literally almost every time there's somebody making a U-turn, pulling up in front of either the weed store or the tap house. And so, I have some empathy for those residents. Like I don't see the speeds on Buena Vista. I don't think that, but those U-turns and like erratic driving, I don't know what we can do there to help, but I think we should be, thanks for your answer, Jordan. I think we're on it, but it's always good to be on it, right?
And one thing that we can do is increased enforcement, and I can say our bylaw officer is there all of the time. I'd be interested to get the percentages on what percentage of our traffic tickets are written in that exact location. I would say it's pretty high.
Okay.
Yeah, there's that one parking spot there right off of Church and Buena Vista where you're not supposed to park, and everybody parks there. And that would fund the bylaw officer right there for the ongoing. Yeah. And it blocks the view. Okay, so.
Oh, I see Shelley's hand.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I just.
Sorry. I was just going to let Mayor and Council know that now that Council has seen this report and have a copy, we'll put that on our website so it's available for the public to see. And I'll also put a hard copy down at Town Hall as well if you wanted to look at the hard copy there. So just to let you know.
Great, thank you. All right, safe to carry on. Perfect. All right. Thanks again, Craig, Shelley. So we'll move on to strategic planning and action item report from. Okay, any questions or comments on that? Councillor Bissinger.
Yeah, I asked the question to Jordan already, and I saw the update in the strategic plan, but it was just about the youth engagement survey, and I guess if that's for special.
Yeah, the EOI is open, closing on the 18th. 18th, give or take a day. I'll have to confirm, but next week.
Okay.
Because there's a pack, I think it's Brooklyn Elementary, they're pretty interested and excited to share and spread it and see how they can get involved. So I think they might do a delegation for the next
Good.
couple of weeks.
Okay. Any other further questions or comments on the planning? All right, seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. So for adoption, the 2020 Transportation Master Plan update. And any other questions or comments on that? Again, thank you very much for your work to Shelley's department, and all in favor. All right. And the UBCM meeting requests for discussion. So is there Councillor McGowan you'd like to, and then Councillor Swift, I see.
Quick question first, these meetings, because I, of course, have a million things going through my head. So do they have to have a specific plan involved, or can it be kind of a general area of concern for Comox that has come to our attention or we're working on?
Yeah, it can be any topic.
Okay.
Within any topic within the ministry's purview.
Right. And you get what, 10 minutes?
15 minutes
15
total
minutes.
from start to finish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a list.
Okay, so you'll provide that to staff?
Yep, I can
Okay.
definitely do that.
So I think, so we're gonna have to make decisions next meeting on what meetings you want to book. It may be good to begin a discussion today on what,
Yeah.
on what you want to do, just because next week I know we're going to be getting into Northeast Comox, and we won't be able to delay this discussion because we'll need to submit our requests.
So do you want to present your?
I can present, or I can write it out and send it to everybody. It's a lot to do with either mental health or for children and family development, psychoeducational assessments and autism assessments that are completely unavailable either through the school system or privately. Childcare as well, their mental health and addictions, access to care, decriminalization. And a couple years ago, I think there were a few of us that were at the announcement from the education minister and the mental health and addictions minister at the time about School District 71 becoming a pilot program for mental health and a one-stop. And I have not heard a thing about that since, so I wanted to check in with that.
So perhaps, I hear the items that you want, but can you tell us what ministries? Because that might shorten the list down. So
yeah, I can do that.
yeah, okay.
Children and family development, mental health and addictions, education, social development and poverty reduction, environment and climate change, and transportation and infrastructure, especially since we just found out 60% of that is our roads.
Okay, so that's 6 different ministries that you would like to. Okay, so now CAO, how do you want to deal with this here? Is this something that we vote on, or do we?
It's up to council how you'd like to do it. Generally, the way I would recommend is that council would vote on the topics you want to bring forward, as the ministers will look at this as topics of concerns from the town of Comox. You don't have to do it that way, though. You can just allow council members to request meetings on their individual topics. So I'd say that's up to you. So what we can do is we can talk about that today. I can get the list from Councillor McGowan, put it into a report and have it on the agenda for next week, and council can decide at that point. So it's really up to you. Like I said, there's 2 main directions you can take. Either you look at these and you vote on them to bring them as topics from Comox, or you can say, this is an opportunity for council members to meet with the ministers, and you'll just allow anything to get booked that interests council.
Yeah, Councillor Grant, you have a question?
So is that the most effective way to do it? Because I hear what you're saying, but when you go, you've got 15 minutes with a minister who's got 20 meetings that day. Is there a way to actually book a meeting over and above this with a minister where you could actually sit down and have a more wholesome and better discussion rather than at a day where they're speed dating you through the system. Like, I know what you're trying to
Like a foot
do,
in the door
but it
kind of
just,
thing.
it doesn't, like to me, this is where you go and say, hey, we've got an application in on something or other. Can you speed it through? And you get some action that way. Yeah, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just wondering if there isn't a better solution for some of these where you go down and actually get a half an hour in their office with them and sit down.
Yeah, so that's another way to approach it as well, is when you're looking at issues that take a longer amount of time. A lot of times we can use the UBCM meetings as either as kind of like teasers or your chance to get the foot in the door to request longer meetings in the future. Once we move out of COVID and we're allowed to go down and have those in-person meetings, this will be new for me. We're very close to Victoria. Previously for myself, it was a 3-day trip to have those in-person meetings. So it's much easier here. But to get that amount of time with a minister for topics that are kind of general advocacy is probably tougher to get than it would be for 30 minutes of their time for a specific project that you wanted to talk about or work through. So the 15 minutes at UBCM might be well served towards these general advocacies that they probably wouldn't give you a meeting for otherwise.
Okay, so let's, how about before we make any decision, we'll hear from the individual councillors. I had Councillor Swift and then Councillor Minions, and then we can decide our path forward. So Councillor Swift, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Given our earlier discussion, I was wondering if we should approach the Ministry of Transportation and see what their interest is on the Knight Road section and see where they are with that project and see if we can encourage them to dovetail with our improvements along there.
Right, that was something I was thinking of as well. Okay, so we have that, and then Councillor Minions.
Yeah, I had written down a couple similar ones, and transportation was one of them. I think if we can go with specific projects that we want answers on, that was my thinking as well. I'm wondering if we've ever gotten an answer back on like property transfer tax being allowed to be used for our infrastructure, and I can't quite figure out which one that would go into, but the fact that they're taking, double the taxes over the years and we're not seeing any of it back here while they're offloading or downloading, whatever you want to say. So to me, that the property transfer tax discussion I would want to keep alive, that Councillor Grant brought, I think 2 to 3 years ago to UBCM. So I don't know if like Josie being the ministry affairs person is the person to say, hey, who should we be talking to? But that could also happen offside. But transportation, bringing back property transfer tax. And then if we were farther enough along, I would have thought that the youth project or grant would have been good to get into somebody's ear, but I'm not sure that we have enough to bring to it. Okay. Transportation, property transfer tax are the two that would like to move forward.
Okay, so I don't see any of their hands up. So CAO, would you like them to, would you like to compile this, bring it back to the next meeting, or give you a direction right now?
Nope, compiling and bringing it back to the next meeting is okay, just so long as council's comfortable that at the next meeting you're going to have to make decisions.
You bet. Okay. And anything else from anyone? So that was just for discussion, I believe. And are you comfortable with that, Councilor McGowan, with this process?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, great.
And just a quick note too, I know sometimes, choosing which ministry these things go in, the property transfer taxes, it finances it, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. We choose one, put it in, and if it's not the right one, they will move it over to the proper ministry. So don't worry too much about getting the exact one correct.
Okay, good. So we'll leave that in your capable hands up for next week. Thank you. All right. So sorry, just one more thing. I'll need those lists tomorrow though, because the agenda goes out on Friday. So just shoot them to me as soon as you can.
Will you
Yes, please. Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks. All right. I don't see anything else, and we don't have any correspondence or anything like that. So a motion to adjourn.